the Bull and Terrier. He is famous for his fighting style. Soon he created a reputation for being the greatest fighting dog. He became popularly known as Pitbull. And this is the fourth part of the competition dog audiobook. Chapter 4. Mean Jolene. Originally published in the American Game Dog Times December/January 1992. Mean Jolene came into our lives as the result of a deal. We had a litter of puppies from a son and a daughter of Ch. Garner's Chinaman ROM. And we went. Contacted by a man in California who wanted to negotiate a 9-year-old great-granddaughter. Months of Kate's Gr.ch. Nigerino by one of the puppies. He said the bitch was very sociable, but apparently the small children of his family had tormented the dog since she was a puppy, and she was well on her way to becoming one biter of unrecoverable people. When we picked her up at the airport, she growled at us. Imagining she was just scared, we took the crate to the spare room when we got home and opened the door. She just looked like a dog coming from art should look like, dark red with a black tint on the muzzle and ears, tall and muscular. She also wouldn't come out of the crate and there was no way to get her out, unless not without being seriously bitten. She spent the first 5 days in that crate. She would only come out to eat and defecate. And if we went into the room she'd bolt to the crate like a rat, she'd turn and go. She sat up, snarled and bared her teeth. We finally had to borrow a catching stick from a local vet to get her out of the room for a chain. Ironically, it was the late Jim Bailey who stopped her from being shot that first week. He always wanted some of the blood of the Nigerino lineage, and although he normally not the most patient person with dogs, it was Jim who finally managed to gain Jolene's trust enough to get close to her. Jim sat in her little house daily and talked to her until she finally let go. Caress. Jolene has developed into an intelligent dog who is affectionate with the people she cares about. New and trusted, but it was hell on wheels with anything else, man or puppy. She would look at a stranger in the kennel the same way she would look at another dog. The only time this proved to be a plus point rather than a negative feature was approximately 6 months later, when the squadron SWAT broke into the backyard and they made the arrest for dogfighting. They confiscated all the dogs, and the only bright moment that day was watching Mean Jolene disarm 6 animal control officers dragging their trapping sticks away. Finally they shot her with a tranquilizer gun. Before the trial we got most of the dogs back, with the help of Tom Garner. We did not believe that any sane animal shelter would allow Jolene to live, much less return her to us, but that's what they did, though they destroyed the dogs that remained in post-trial custody as vicious. What remained in the yard was relocated to the mountains, and Jolene had puppies. That fall, sons of Tar Heel Matt Panther, a destroyer son of Zebo. She refused to let anyone near her house, and until the puppies had 3 weeks we were wondering if we would have to shoot her to get the pups, when it was time to wean them. Then came Hurricane Hugo. 1 tornado flattened our woods, and the next morning Jolene came out of her house so kind, like a lamb, and was herself from that point on. She always started fighting early and did very well in her first challenge, from prison. A couple of months after she weaned her pups we took her up to the mountains. Some guys from out of state had brought in a bitch that was 2 pounds bigger, and they had brought her up. She was a super violent dog who hit hard on our dog and spread one of her legs open to the bone as soon as she was gone. Drop. This was her first and last footprint. 9 minutes ago Jolene had broken her front legs and was working on the bitch's throat upside down. Someone from ringside commented, "Your bitch is really hurting the other one." And the mountain man turned to him and said, "Hurting? She's killing that dog, and if those boys don't pick her up right now, they'll be burying the dog." From them, we continued to educate Jolene, and she looked better every time she competed. We decided to try another litter of hers before challenging her and crossed her with Long's Wordo, an unborn son of Ch. Jeep Rom and violent in the game like no other dog alive could be. Wordo had constantly created winners, and even though we heard of Nigerino blood crossed with Jeep blood, we felt it would be a really good breeding. Jolene had the puppies that spring, and once again, she wouldn't let us near her. From them, she was completely friendly until she had her first puppy. From that point on she ran with us from her house. At that time we were having a lot of problems with bitches who were bad mothers, so Jolene's overprotection didn't bother us very. There were 6 puppies in that litter. 1 pair went to Mountain Man, another pair us. We kept. One of the males that looked like a Jeep went to someone in California who was just starting to breed puppies, and a female went to a good friend in the New York State. Jim Bailey had given up dogs after prison and had taken up residence in a apartment, but he still kind of owned Jolene. He had found a place to keep some dogs, and we had given him some puppies, including a bitch daughter of Jolene and Panther. His big dream was to compete with Jolene. He got halfway through low since prison and didn't even go to pranks, but her prank was going to be the big his day, was all he said. The procreation that produced it had been repeated, and the Jim had saved his money for a male of the litter, and we sent a deposit to buy a female for us. Jim worked for a company that sold tanks of oxygen and other gases, and he drove a delivery truck. In June of that year, Jim's truck was hit by a car that ran a red light. His truck overturned several times and landed upside down in a creek bed. He suffered severe damage in the head and never came out of the coma. He died a month and a half later. The driver of car that hit him was under medical care and didn't look like he could drive. Young, but has never been charged with any crime. Jim never got to see Jolene compete, or his new puppy. When the puppies arrived, we tried to imagine what kind of name Jim would have given his puppy, and we proposed Lucifer, and then we found out through his partner that this was the exact name he had chosen. After this brood we almost couldn't wait to challenge Jolene. She was a devastating dog whose intent, the moment it was released, was to kill the opponent. If she had a flaw, it was that she had absolutely no sensation of self-preservation and refused to fight in defense, but we felt that she more than he made up for it with her skill and her mouth. That fall we posted her weight and started working with her. She took long time to find a match. We didn't get to challenge her until January. We had heard that Gary D. on the coast had a bitch her weight who was a winner of a fight. The details were worked out and a date set. We give you tips for make the 8-hour trip to the mountains, and both sides absolutely agreed. Secret: one of the conditions of the match was that if either side arrived with more than 5 people, that side would pay a fine and the match would be annulled. Jolene loved to work and she held her own very well. The night before departure he was on weight and looked stronger than any other time we'd seen him. The match would start at dawn, and when we left to catch Jolene in the middle night to make the journey up into the mountains, she knew something was going to happen. We went to great lengths to keep her still in her crate throughout the trip. Anyone who has ever competed with a dog will know how we compete. Felt when we drove to Mountain Man's house, nervous as hell. Aside from our nerves and the 2 cups of coffee we each drank before leaving, it was clear, halfway there, that we would have to make a stop. Nothing was open. We drove very slowly through the last big city in the way, hoping to find a 24H gas station. When we found one, finally pulled into the parking lot, our relief turned to horror when a car came in behind us, with the familiar flashing lights overhead. Alerted by our suspicious driving, the policeman had followed us all the way in town, thinking we were drunk. With our medical kit, towels and a test weight on the back seat, not to mention a very angry bulldog in a crate, we nearly panicked. Luck was on our side. The cop did not question our explanation that we were on our way to Virginia to mating a bitch and we were looking for a restroom. That part was true, and walked away. Needless to say, we were completely nervous. After that encounter, we arrived just before dawn. Gary D. and his group arrived a few minutes after. They had made the trip the night before and had stayed at a motel. Barney Fife had come all the way from Virginia just to see their dog fight, so we figured she must be a pretty good dog, but our confidence was high. Gary was accompanied by Ricky W., who owned the dog, his girlfriend, and Barney Fife. Mountain Man has agreed to act as arbitrator, and without further delay, the dogs were weighed and released. His dog was called Sadie. She was a black dog, with cropped ears and a little less, for her weight, than Jolene. The dogs hardly entered together in the center of the ring, and it was clear that Jolene was the stronger of the 2. She started working on one shoulder, and was holding Sadie pretty well around the shoulder ring. Sadie was in her head, and working well as far as we could tell. We saw that things were exactly as we had hoped, and the other side looked surprised and worried. They said that Jolene was the first bitch that put Sadie in defense of her life. For the first 10 minutes or so, it was just Jolene and Sadie throwing side to side with that grip on the shoulder. Little do we realize that although she was destroying Sadie with her footprint, Sadie was literally killing her with hers. Jolene never made a sign that she was hurt or anything, just kept working that shoulder. Around the 12-minute mark Jolene appeared to be weakened. Sadie saw the chance from her and went to a forepaw. That was her favorite style, and she knew how to work like this. We found out later that she had broken both of her front legs. First opponent and had literally ripped one of them off. Jolene was not a very smart fighting dog. Her attitude was, "You bite my leg, and I will bite your strongest." Sadie, on the other hand, was a super intelligent dog. She would take one of the front paws, go down the hand, and shake it violently. Then she'd grab the other quickly and work it, then go back to the first. That was almost the step for the next 10 minutes. It was Jolene's return to the rear. Both of her front legs were almost out of order, but her tail was still curled tightly over her ass and wagging approximately 90 miles per hour. We were now worried. We could see that something wasn't right with Jolene. She looked dazed and disoriented and was getting weaker as time went on. Past. Sadie was leading the way, but we let Jolene stay there, and we waited. That maybe she could win in the race. At around the 25-minute mark, Jolene had been ripped off, but she continued to work determinedly from the underside, and grabbed everything she could. She saw the neck and went after it, and tried with everything she had to explore it. It was a thing. Good thing she didn't have a lot of mouth to spare, that was her weakness. She lost track of neck, got back to his feet, and tried to shake him. At that point we realized that we were so far behind that we decided to pick up our dog. There had been no break in the fight, and neither bitch showed any signs of bad, but we wanted the bout of courtesy anyway. The front legs. Her mutilated limbs no longer supported her. When she was released she collapsed to the ground. At the second her ass hit the ground, she would kick the ground and catapult herself into the ground. Corner. She would stumble around the ring like a zombie and walk on her wrist joints. Her with her feet thumping back and forth. As always her ass was up and shaking, and her eyes never stopped searching the other bitch. She was caught before she made contact, to save her from further damage. Sadie made a hard courtesy attack, and she too was grabbed before she could touch Jolene, who was struggling feebly to catch her. Sportsmanship was high on both sides. We congratulated Sadie's side on winning them and they praised our bitch. Barney Fife helped us work with our bitch. For those who don't know, he was the one who saved Grch Buck after the fight with Sandman and is, in our opinion, one of the best ways to save a dog, and we took an intravenal and gave him some dexamethasone. Losing Jolene didn't cross our minds for a minute. She was alert and not. She looked like she was going into shock. No one noticed how badly she was hurt, except the mountain man. Perhaps, when we were leaving, what he told us was that he would really like to get some more puppies from her if she escaped. We went home, sad but not feeling too bad. If we had to lose, we couldn't have lost to better people, and Sadie was probably the best bitch we had ever seen. Jolene had shown herself to be a dog of real game, and we were feeling pretty positive about the whole thing. We fell apart when we got home. Jolene was in shock. She was so psychologically debilitated that it was necessary to disassemble the crate to get her out. From there, we spent the next hour desperately trying to save her, but nothing we could do. We did help. Sadie had destroyed her face so badly her sinuses were crushed. Her whole face was pulsing up and down when she breathed, and the air was bubbling out of the holes in her snout and around her eyes. The last thing Jolene did before she completely lost consciousness was to throw up a massive incredible amount of blood. We don't understand how she could have swallowed so much. Us carefully observed her open mouth with a flashlight, and that's when we saw how much she was hurt. There was a big hole between the eyes on the outside of it, big enough to fit a dime through, and this hole, it went through her skull and emerged on the roof of her mouth right in front of her throat. One trickle of blood was running down her throat. She must have been hemorrhaging. During the fight, we sat there despondent and watched our object of pride and joy let out one last hesitant breath, and then Jolene was gone. We'd already seen a few fighting dogs, but we'd have to say that Jolene was the first real, game dog we owned. Even some of the dogs more valiant they showed when they are very wounded, the tail can drop a little. They might even stop a little, they might moan or they might cry a little. After all, they are only flesh and blood. Jolene wasn't a champion, or even a winner, but she showed the characteristic that makes a bulldog so brave. Equal, in its purest form, she accepted death doing what she liked best, without show any sign that she was injured. We were devastated. We hadn't just lost a big pitbull and even the most valuable bitch in the litter, but a good friend. We loved that dog. Crazy Red, and we'll miss her, but we can't say we were regret having defied her. Jolene probably could have almost knocked any other bitch her weight, and she loved fighting more than anything else. She's a too bad she had to fight the only one she couldn't beat, but it would be wrong to deny her Jolene her chance, and we believe it was the happiest day of her life. Jim Bailey would have been proud. We like to think he was watching somehow. And that the two are together now. We would like to thank Mountain Man and his family for their hospitality and all your help and support, Barney Fife for doing what he could for our dog after fight, and to Gary and Ricky for good sportsmanship. Sadie is one hell of a dog and showed that she can catch as well as hit, and won her championship. After that, finally, we would like to thank Terry Townsend for making the procreation that produced Jolene, and for Lucifer and Piranha that came from the repetition of crossing. The pups we kept from Jolene's litters were, by far, very good. We say goodbye to you, Jolene, and we feel privileged to be able to call you member of our family. That was the fourth part of the audiobook, The Competition Dog. Sign up so you don't miss the fifth part. My name is Rodolpho Luiz, and I appreciate every comment, like and share. God bless you all. I went.
Ooh.